Hello, everyone. We are now recording the 14th episode of the Podcaster. We're here today with Rish from Neynar. First of all, thank you so much, Rish, for joining the podcast.
Of course.
And we'd love for you to start with a short introduction of Neynar. What's being sold by Neynar?
Yeah, Neynar is a cloud infrastructure provider for Farcaster today. We started building out a consumer app on top of Farcaster and built out a lot of infrastructure to support our own application. And as an experiment, summer of last year, we threw out this web page that said, if you wanted access to some of this infrastructure, you could pay us. We didn't really expect anybody to sign up, honestly, but people started paying us within the first few hours. And so we were like, oh, people actually want this. And so we kept iterating on the product. And that was about 15 months ago when we started on the infrastructure side. And since then, we have become the de facto infrastructure provider for Farcaster. We provide things from like hosted hubs to REST APIs, webhooks, data streaming pipelines, indexers. And so people can come and build a whole range of infrastructure, applications on top of our toolkit. And we support all the way from like indie developers hacking on weekends to like larger companies like Dune. And so we have a whole host of products built on top of that set.
Very cool. And I wonder, how risky did it feel to build infrastructure on Farcaster so early? Because like when you started the company, there wasn't too much traction on Farcaster, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
So how did it feel like to take such a risk?
I mean, obviously there was some risk. I think there is still some risk now, but the way I think about risk is the only real the only real edge of a founder or a young startup has is the level of thoughtful risk they're looking to take. Because the company that can take that risk meaningfully in a manner that is conscious and something they've thought about is what is going to set them apart in the long run. And we thought about Farcaster as early crypto companies might have thought about Ethereum or Bitcoin. So if you go back to how Coinbase started on Bitcoin in 2012, Bitcoin didn't really have any traction and nobody was really building large Bitcoin companies. And so we kind of were at Coinbase for the last 4 years, and we had been kind of looking at how the overall crypto ecosystem developed and the kind of risks that were taken. You can even go back prior to crypto, like when 2000 companies, when Amazon was taking a risk on the World Wide Web and starting a bookstore that was just online. So these kind of risks have always been taken, and some kind of measured, thoughtful risk taking is what allows us to build meaningful companies. So we were okay taking that risk, and that's a risk we continue to live with today.
Cool. And I wonder, like, who were the initial customers back then, like when you first started? Because like right now, there's now like lots of clients, lots of different apps, lots of consumer apps building on top of Farcaster. But back then, there wasn't that many companies needing this infrastructure,
Yeah,
I guess. So who were your
yeah,
initial
yeah.
customers?
Our initial customers were like the weekend hobbyists. It was like people like us. We built the infrastructure for ourselves, like I said. So we were building on nights and weekends a consumer app that was using Farcaster in the back. And there were other people building on nights and weekends using Farcaster in the back. And those people were our first customers who were like, oh, I have access to the infrastructure that I don't have to spin up myself anymore. And so our first like n number of users were just like hobbyists like you and me who would come in and start building something. And we got a lot of cool bots and apps and even different kinds of like data set queries and things that got spun up, and some of them still live today.
Cool. And we'd love for you to go over the product offering at Neynar. What exactly, like, how does your product look like exactly?
So there's a range of products we offer today. All of them are Farcaster focused, but it's designed to help you in your developer journey, depending on what you're building. So if you are building, for example, a client, so there's a bunch of clients today that run on Neynar infrastructure, Supercast, Recaster, Answer, feeds, like I'm forgetting a few, but all of these clients mostly use our REST APIs, and that allows you to read and write data. When you're writing data, we offer auth management and signer management tools. So writing data to Farcaster requires managing your signer. We store it securely. The developer doesn't have to worry about it, and they can just use our write endpoints. We offer webhooks. If you're like powering notifications or real-time data, you can use our webhooks to do that in your client. We offer like data ingestion pipelines. If you're building like ML tools or AI training, you can use our Kafka streams or Parquet ingestion streams to then get data into your data set and then train models on top of that. And there are also certain clients who want very real-time data, but they don't want to maintain their own hub and indexer, which can add up both maintenance and compute cost over time. So what we do is we run indexers that can write specific schemas to databases that our customers have. And they come in, they put in their database credentials somewhere. It's a Farcaster specific database. And then we can write Farcaster data real time to their database, and then they can build on top of that. So depending on what developers are looking to do, there's a whole range of solutions available that they can pick from.
Cool. And we'd love for you to also go over your past experience. As you mentioned before, you worked at Coinbase. I wonder what were you doing back then in Coinbase?
Yeah, so at Coinbase, I had the opportunity to work on a few different things. I worked on Coinbase's self-custody wallet, which is Coinbase Wallet, Base, the L2 that Coinbase launched last year. Prior to that, I was working on the Learn and Earn products, where you could learn about crypto, earn crypto, as part of the Coinbase consumer app. Coinbase is also where I met my co-founder. He and I worked together for a bunch of these things. He was also leading the team for the MPC wallet back then. Prior to Coinbase, I was working on Messenger at Facebook.
Cool. And would love for you to also deep dive into sort of like what were your like biggest learning experiences working at Coinbase? What sort of stuff did you take from Coinbase into Neynar?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and I think most ex-Coinbase founders apply the same mentality. Brian Armstrong likes to say it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems. And the crypto market is notorious for being volatile. For what it's worth, I don't think it's just the crypto market. The larger market is volatile as well. Early markets are always volatile. So if you go back to the 90s and early 2000s, the dot-com bubble and the tech market was super volatile. And dealing with that volatility is a acquired skill. And so being at Coinbase allows you to like learn how to keep your focus on the product and serving customers and creating value, regardless of what the market noise might be about. And that is something I think every ex-Coinbase founder carries into their company, where regardless of the external environment, if you are focused on your customer and delivering value and creating that feedback cycle, that's the most important thing. And we do the same at Neynar, regardless of what's happening in the larger ecosystem.
And like, if you had to mark like the differences between working for a company, being Coinbase, or like in general working for a company compared to being now a founder, what would you say are like the largest differences? And like, yeah, what have you noted as difference between being a founder now and being an employee in the past?
There's a lot of differences depending on the stage of the company you're at. So, in some logistical differences, just being a founder instead of an employee, now you have to care about a whole host of things that employees don't have to care about. Like I have to care about what kind of insurance the company provides, what health benefits do we provide, how do we file taxes in every state, are we like making sure that the employer tax and the revenue tax is filed separately, what does our accounting software look like? Obviously no employee has to worry about this, which is good. Like they shouldn't have to worry about this. They should be focused on the work that they're here to do. But that's like a logistical difference. I think on a more philosophical scale, founders have a much more like existential crisis to worry about that employees ideally don't, where every day you're thinking about how do we make sure that the company is on the best possible path? What are the existential risks to the company that will kill the company? And how can we mitigate those risks over 1 year, 5 year, 10-year cycle? Not every existential risk needs to be mitigated immediately. But you just need to have like an eye towards like, are we moving in the right long-term direction to be able to mitigate this risk on a long enough time cycle? And some employees think about these things. Many employees don't. And it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. Like employees are focused on the details of the work they're doing, and the work of the founding team is to focus on mitigating long-term risks. So that is another difference. And I think finally, in a young enough company, like a small company, when you're starting off the company, it can feel very different in terms of like you go from working with like tens to hundreds of people to just working alone or just with your co-founder. And that's a meaningful difference in terms of like what work feels like on a daily level. Obviously, that changes as you hire more people and your team grows. But there's a sudden jump from like, oh, I speak with like 20 people, 30 people daily to like I speak with 0 to 1 person daily. Um, and that's something that requires some getting used to.
I see. And I wonder what led you into Farcaster in the first place. What excited you in the beginning, and also what sort of like your thesis behind Farcaster in general?
Yeah, so I've generally been excited in decentralized social space for a while. It marries my interest in social and crypto. I was interested in social, that's why I was at Facebook. I was interested in crypto, that's why I moved from Facebook to Coinbase. And Mana and I, we both had this shared interest, and we had been studying social protocols for a while. So we were talking to the teams at like PPIF back in the day, or BitCloud when that came out. I think they changed it to DSO at some point. Um, then like Dan and Varun published the Farcaster paper in 2021. Lens was coming out at the same time, and we had been studying and kind of interacting with all these protocols. Farcaster was the first one that excited us because we felt it was the first one that really thought about how to scale the protocol as the number of users and actions on the protocol increased. And there was a rigor and level of thinking that we hadn't traditionally seen in the previous protocol explorations in the space. And so we started using Farcaster very early, like we were among the first 200 users on the protocol back in 2021, where it was a very limited toolkit with a very small number of people. And then we just kept using it. Like the best way to understand a protocol is to just be in it and using it and talk to users. And then in 2023, we started building on top of it. And we had followed the journey from a small protocol where it was just like literally a file on a server that you could read and write from, to like Workcast had its own set of APIs. And then at some point they launched hubs. We were among the first people to use hubs outside of Workcast. And as we kept building it, we gained both more confidence in the team shaping the protocol, which is Merkle, and the direction that the protocol was heading in. So all put together, we were excited enough about it that we decided to do something full time.
I wonder, like, had you worked with Dan in the past at Coinbase?
No, I think I joined a few months after he left.
I wonder what sort of things do you think Farcaster is missing? Like, if we want like 100x the number of daily average users, um, of course, content is one part of it, but in general, like, what do you think is missing for Farcaster to pick
I mean,
up and
100x daily
essentially,
average users is what is missing from Farcaster right now. I think
yeah,
there's this like cycle of content to user to like the users creating more content. So I think if you have the number of users, they will come in and do things, and the protocol will keep moving in a certain direction. The biggest problem for Farcaster, and I think largely crypto today, it's not even specific to Farcaster, is that crypto and Farcaster as a derivative is still on its way to figuring out how to bring in users and provide enough value that they stick. Crypto is on a mission to like do this for finances. Farcaster is on a mission to do this for social actions. I think the end state for this looks like where people, like the mainstream people, don't really know what the protocol is behind the scenes, and they don't really care. They're just getting net new value that they weren't getting today, and it's now possible, and they can do net new things that they're excited about. And I think that's what both crypto and Farcaster have to solve to some extent. And that's what will drive new users to these protocols. And that's the main missing thing.
I see. Um, we'd love for you also to go over like what do you imagine of Neynar in the coming years? Like, how do you see Neynar 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now?
Yeah, great question. I think for the near term, we are focused on the work we are doing, which is building developer blocks in the Farcaster ecosystem. We started with building cloud-hosted blocks. We have just started experimenting with adding more stuff on chain. So we created a smart contract, for example, where you can pass in a wallet address and get the FID for that address directly from smart contract to smart contract without needing to go off chain for anything. We deployed it on base Sepolia. We have gotten some requests since then to move it from Sepolia testnet to base mainnet, which should happen in November. And we were excited to see people using this data natively on chain. We are also experimenting with ways to like add to the protocol directly. So Farcaster protocol allows you to make improvement proposals that you can then add to like extend the protocol. And so I think our current near to medium term work will focus on this full spectrum of like on-chain, cloud-hosted to Farcaster protocol. And then as that develops, we'll find new ways to create value for users.
I see. And in this year and a half or 2 years that you've been building Neynar, I wonder what has been the biggest challenge as of now?
I think, well, I think starting the company with the risk that we talked about in the beginning of this conversation, that itself was a challenge where we had to like kind of navigate and figure out what we were going to focus the company on. Once we got started, though, I think one of the biggest challenges was earlier this year when first Farcaster went through the frame hype cycle and then the Degen meme coin hype cycle. And during both those cases, the network had a lot of inbound, both users and content increase. And that level of traffic increase on the network, and then we had a lot of like usage increase as part of that hype cycle, that really stress tested our systems. And we were like 2, maybe 3 people at that time. And so we had to do a lot of like incident management. Our own infrastructure had to scale. Things would go down from time to time. And so we were like sleeping in like 3-hour shifts. And just to make sure that everything was up, and it wasn't always up, but we tried as best as we could. Obviously, since we have moved on since then and we have hired more people, we have a stronger team now, and we are able to manage these kind of things more effectively. But that was both challenging but an intense, fun time.
Cool. And would love for you to also explain what's your vision sort of behind frames. How do you like? Do you think there's room for improvement in terms of the capabilities behind frames? For example, we've seen recently some companies building games on frames, but of course, there's a limited amount of features those games could have. And so I wonder, how do you imagine frames in the future? Do you think they can be significantly improved?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that remains to be seen how the frame spec develops. I think Varun just cast it out yesterday with some feedback they were seeking on how to get to the next iteration of that spec. I think right now there's some things that the frames could do better. So, for example, they only allow one kind of media embed, which is just images, and you can add some moving images as part of that. But you can't have video or you can't have audio. And so there's limited kind of rich media that you can provide. The frame sizes are not always well developed for like native mobile screens. So you can't have longitudinal frames like a full TikTok video. You can only have 1.9:1 frames or 1:1 frames. They work pretty well, but there's room, like you said, to like take it to more device specific formats. The kind of interactions you can have are bundled into like a series of buttons, and you can have like anywhere between 1 to 4. But that doesn't allow you to have all the interactions you might want if you like tapped on the media itself in some way. So I think we'll see how the frame strategy develops over time. I think it's a great experiment in terms of what you can do with a very simple primitive format. And then see what kind of usage you get in order to then develop it to the next stage.
Cool. Thank you so much, Rich, for taking the time to join the podcast here. I really appreciate
Of course.
you coming here. And yeah, see you around. Thank you so much.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Sebastian.